Hi, I'm Pat Arian. I direct the University of Washington Alacrity Center, and I am a psychotherapy researcher and expert.
And hi, I'm Aaron Lyon. I co-direct the UW Alacrity Center and the Methods Core within the Alacrity Center, and I'm primarily an implementation researcher. In this short video, we'll be talking about how to select and prioritize intervention and implementation strategy elements for redesign. Pat and I will be sharing two examples of how to prioritize intervention and implementation features. The first will be a more informal approach to identifying intervention elements based on the Use EBPI method. And the second will be a more formal, structured approach to identifying implementation strategy elements based on the SWIS, or Cognitive Walkthrough for Implementation Strategies method. You can read more about these methods in the resources provided with this video.
So let's put this into the Discover, Design, Build, and Test framework, or as we like to call it, the DDBT context. Prioritizing features to redesign occurs in the Discover phase of the DDBT context. Remember, it's during this phase that you're working really closely with the end user, the therapist, the patient, or the organizational lead. And the purpose is to determine what the challenges are in using an evidence-based practice. In the Discover phase, you'll be focusing on identifying the different needs and points of views of all stakeholders to understand the unadapted evidence-based practice and its context, and to clarify usability issues and other barriers to implementation. When identifying intervention elements at the University of Washington Alacrity Center, we often draw from the Use EBPI model to specify intervention tasks that must be accomplished, as well as aspects of the intervention packaging. This includes content elements, structures, artifacts, and parameters. So let's move to how this is done using an informal observational model of feature prioritization with a specific focus on intervention content elements. I've been researching and using problem-solving therapy for late-life depression for decades. I tend to use the NEZU model, which includes a therapeutic element called problem orientation. Problem orientation is a lot like the C in cognitive behavioral therapy. It's about how people appraise their ability to solve a problem. And frankly, it's also about how they appraise the success of a solution to a problem. According to NEZU, and Desarella, this element is considered to be critical, meaning it's hypothesized to be an essential part of the treatment. However, my team has observed in several trials and implementation projects that most therapists and patients spend very little time with this element, in large part because a majority of older adults don't seem to have much difficulty with orientation. Most older adults have a fair appraisal of their situation and respond positively to successful outcomes. In fact, our patient exit interviews found that most patients found problem orientation to be completely unnecessary and delayed getting to what they perceived to be the most helpful part of the therapy, the problem-solving skills. We further observed this finding through audio tape review of sessions, and we confirmed this finding through structured interviews with therapists who routinely use problem-solving therapy with older adults in their practice. To better understand why problem orientation tended to be ignored by therapists and patients, we looked to the cognitive neuroscience of aging literature and learned that as we age, our ability to accurately appraise our ability to solve problems becomes quite good. We initially concluded that it would be best to just remove problem orientation from the model for late-life depression. And in fact, we did that in two large randomized clinical trials of problem-solving therapy in late-life depression. However, we then got a different set of complaints from therapists that while most of their patients did well with a modified version of problem-solving therapy, there were some cases that were not engaging in their action plans, were either very pessimistic or emotionally dysregulated, and those patients had outcomes that were quite poor as a result. Therapists indicated that some form of problem orientation was needed for these particular patients, but not in the way that it was originally designed. This is how we identified and prioritized problem orientation as an element in need of redesign, which led us to create a new version of problem-solving therapy called Engage.
Now let's turn to a more structured approach to feature prioritization during the DDBT Discover phase. Although we originally articulated this approach as an application to implementation strategies, it's also relevant to patient-facing interventions. The Cognitive Walkthrough for Implementation Strategies, or SWIS method, is a comprehensive approach to identifying usability issues in implementation strategies. Today, I'll just be talking about the task analysis and prioritization steps within that method, so just steps 2 and 3. Hierarchical task analysis involves identifying all the tasks and subtasks within them that have independent meaning and collectively compose an implementation strategy. Some tasks are behavioral and observable, like taking notes, and some are cognitive and unobservable, like prioritizing information for discussion. There's no one way to identify all the discrete tasks in a strategy or in an intervention, but it's often helpful to have multiple members of your team review an initial set of tasks and ask themselves some of the following questions. How is this task carried out, which can help to identify additional subtasks? Why are they doing this, which can help to learn how tasks fit into a wider context or grouping? And what happens before and what happens after to identify task sequencing? After an exhaustive task list is identified, the team can prioritize tasks for subsequent testing by rating 2 items. 1, the anticipated likelihood that users might encounter issues or errors when completing the task. And 2, the criticality or importance of completing the task correctly. We often rate these both on a 1 to 5 scale, with 1 being unlikely to make errors and low importance, and 5 being highly prone to make errors and highly important. Now for a quick example. We evaluated a post-training expert consultation strategy for supporting mental health clinicians in the use of measurement-based care. Our task analysis for the consultation strategy identified 24 unique tasks that related either to live consultation calls, an asynchronous message board, or between session work for participants. 4 members of our project team independently rated the importance and error likelihood for each task, the highest rated ones of which are displayed in the table. Ultimately, the highest rated tasks were converted into testing scenarios for further evaluation, but that's beyond the scope of this video.
Well, thank you for tuning in, and we sincerely hope this was very helpful to you.
If you need consultation on how to prioritize components for redesign, please reach out to us at uwalacrity.org.